Here's a report card for President Obama that grades how well he did in dealing with men's issues in his first term. Could it be that he has a bias against men and boys? You be the judge. Let's have a look. One of the first things Obama did when he took office was to create a White House Council on Women and Girls. This made women's issues an integral part of every level of the federal government. Now each department must address their progress or lack of progress as it relates to women and their issues. This is a powerful step for women and girls. A for women and girls. But what about men and boys? Warren Farrell was invited to be an advisor for the Obama Women and Girls Commission. He expressed to the White House staff that there was a need for a similar council for boys and men. Farrell pulled together a nonpartisan group of over 30 national experts on boys and men and drafted a proposal for this needed commission. The proposal made it to the White House, but was deep-sixed. The lace curtain was simply too strong. Even the president ignored it. Obama was to meet with one of the members of the Farrell group and promptly struck any discussion of this proposal from the agenda the day before the meeting was to take place. He didn't want to discuss the needs of boys and men. Fail for boys and men. Let's turn to health care. This administration has 7 national commissions for women's health. If you look on the web, you see womenshealth.gov and also girlshealth.gov. Both bring focus and attention to the issues of women and girls' health. The Affordable Health Care Act seems to have plenty of preventive care for both women and girls, along with robust coverage for female-specific problems. President Obama has repeatedly voiced his concern for women and girls and the importance of health care for them specifically. A for girls and women's health. But how about the men? Instead of this administration carrying 7 commissions for men's health, they have 0. That's right, 0. Not one federal commission for men's health. I've yet to find any preventive care specifically for men in the Affordable Care Act. This act mentions breast 44 times. Prostrate? Not once. Remember the womenshealth.gov page and the girlshealth.gov page? Well, when you go to menshealth.gov, you get this. A 404 file not found error. It doesn't exist. Same thing for boyshealth.gov. It's simply not there. How unequal could this be? Obama fails men and boys once again while focusing on women and girls. The president continually voices his concern over the wage gap and women getting equal pay. We know now that a discriminatory wage gap is largely a myth from books such as Warren Farrell's Why Men Earn More, from a 2009 Labor Department report, and even a feminist AAUW paper. All of these state clearly that once you control for factors such as part-time versus full-time, hazardous duty versus office work, overtime worked, etc., the unexplained wage gap goes to only a nickel on a dollar. And frankly, they're not so sure about that nickel. Here's a quote from the 2009 Labor Department report. Quote, "The raw wage gap continues to be used in misleading ways to advance public policy agendas without fully explaining the reasons behind the gap." Unquote. Science hasn't stopped the Obama administration from using this tired old myth to promote himself as being the champion of women. For 40 years, Title IX has been used to increase opportunities for girls in sports while dismantling hundreds of male sports teams. Now the Obama administration wants to use this same law to get more girls into science classes. No mention of boys who are now lagging in schools and in college admissions, and no concern for nursing, education, or social work courses where males are a tiny fraction of the students. Fail for men and boys. The president speaks regularly about women's reproductive choices and their importance, but I've yet to hear him utter a word on men's lack of reproductive choice and the onerous burden of watching your wanted child be aborted against your will. Nursing schools are starting the discussion of finding a way to honor both men and women in this difficult time and giving both some decision power, but the Obama administration only thinks of the girls. Fail for men and boys. Then there's the issue of violence. Men are more often the victims of both violence and murder, but when you look at the legislation and funding for victims of violence, it's almost all directed towards women. We've spent billions of dollars funding the Violence Against Women Act, which Obama and Biden have been pushing. They both recently did a TV commercial which called on men to not be violent towards women. This is a good thing, but it's glaringly obvious that they've done no commercial asking women to not be violent towards their men. It's the same one-sided pattern we've been seeing repeatedly. Help the girls, ignore the boys. Many of you may be thinking that the Violence Against Women Act is for women, since men are not the victims of domestic violence from their female partners. You would be incorrect. A mountain of research proves you wrong. Just look at the latest CDC survey, which found that in the last year, men were 52% of the victims of domestic violence. The science is there looking us straight in the face, and Obama and his administration simply look the other way and focus only on women. A for women and girls, epic fail for men and boys. Oh, and jobs. When it came time to offer funds and support for those seeking employment during the crisis of our economic downturn, the president had a shovel-ready plan in place. The feminists complained greatly, and even though this has been known to be a man session, the president altered his shovel-ready plans and spent a good deal of the money on jobs for women. 42% of the money went to female jobs, even though women were only 20% of those impacted. Women get an A, fail for men and boys. Fatherhood. There are millions of men in the United States who have suffered under the weight of a biased family court system. One would expect our president to have some words of support for these men. However, President Obama on Father's Day calls out fathers and says, and I quote, "Too many fathers are AWOL. They've abandoned their responsibilities and are acting like boys instead of men," unquote. His Father's Day speeches have been littered with this sort of verbiage about how fathers need to step up to the plate. His main idea is not to celebrate the fathers and their many contributions in our lives, but to point towards those who need to improve. Happy Father's Day. Imagine he did something similar on Mother's Day and told mothers they need to step up to the plate and stop abusing their children. All hell would break loose. Fail for everyone. When you add up all of these examples, it's clear that President Obama has failed miserably in dealing with men's issues. It seems he has a hard time finding compassion for the plight of boys and men. How about you? Do you have compassion for boys and men? And don't forget, men are good.